Foo Dog Films presents Paid to Dream with Charles Dennis. Hello. Hi, I'm Charles Dennis, and this is the first ever podcast of Paid to Dream. For many years, it was strictly audio, but through the miracle of whatever, we are here with my first guest, Ed Begley.
Here we are. Charles.
Here we are, Ed. Do you know that this year is the 40th anniversary of our knowing each other?
How do you like that?
1984.
That sounds right. And the Hard Four was the script that brought us together.
I had just written a script called Hard Four that I wanted you and Jeff Goldblum to be in. And I contacted you guys and you went to dinner. And I remember you said that when you read the script, it reminded you of this movie you'd seen called Finders Keepers. And that was my script. That was my book, The Next to Last Train Ride.
That's right.
And then when the dinner was over, we retired to my house, you and I, and we played one-on-one Trivial Pursuit.
Proving yourself to be the champion, a title you held for many years.
And then you took me on tour.
That's right. With other Trivial Pursuit games, we needed a ringer.
Yeah, and I was like the ringer. I was the guy from out of town who really didn't know me. You know, I was like the pool shark.
Yeah, what's that, a pool cue? How do you put that? It's called a balabushka. What do you screw these two ends together? Rack.
Yeah, I think we went to Mimi Rogers' house and she immediately got you to fix her hi-fi. That's how old we are, hi-fi. No one's used that one in years.
Right.
You were always the repairman for these women.
I was handy, with electronics and plumbing were my two strong suits.
You came into my life before I ever met you. In 1968, I was flying from Toronto to Los Angeles, and on board the plane was your dad with your sister. And we got to talking, and he said, "How old are you?" And I told him, he said, "Oh, you should meet my son, Ed." But it took about 16 years after that for us to meet.
Right.
I was thinking this morning that you and I are both older than our fathers lived to be.
Yeah, I made it to 75, and I'm still here, shocking though it may be. And also, my dad only made it to 69, sadly.
Oh, I thought he was 70. And my dad made it to 70, I think, and that was it. But they both lived very tough lives.
They did.
You know, they were red meat men with no strangers to drink.
That's true. They liked their gargle.
That's a very nice way of putting it. That's so strange about Hard Four that I was not able to set it up with you two guys. And I remembered some jerk at Fox saying, "Who's going to pay money to see them?" And then the next year, you and Jeff went off to Yugoslavia.
Proving this guy right.
That was a bizarre adventure, wasn't it?
It was, but it was fun. We had a good time doing it. And had it been your script, we might have done a little bit better. But you can't change the way events take you, and it all took us to a perfectly wonderful spot. In your career, Jeff's and mine, we all did wonderful things and continue to.
But as a vegan, I remember you had a really hard time over there.
Yeah, it was very difficult. No matter what you said, I think I was even just vegetarian back then.
Oh.
And so there was a little bit of leeway. So I said, thank you for bringing me this meal, but I don't want any meat. Okay, I'll just bring you some pork. No meat. Pork is not meat. Meat is a steak. No, I don't want any pork. I don't want any lamb. I don't want any veal. No venison, just no meat. Okay, we bring pepperoni. We put it in the salad. They just couldn't understand. We have meat. Why would you not want meat? We have meat. We're not out of wheat. We're important in the country. We have meat for you. They couldn't understand anyone not wanting meat.
Yeah. After years of going without. I have described you often as my John the Baptist because you turned me on to a cleaner environment, a better planet. I remember both our daughters, they're a month apart, and they were at a birthday party, and we went to pick them up. I can't remember what it was, but you had your Prius,
Right.
and we were driving down Laurel Canyon, and you pulled to the side and said, "Here, you drive it." And I got behind the wheel of the car, and that was it.
Yeah. Why not? There was a no compromise vehicle. You could drive cross country if you needed. It was much, much cleaner because it had electric, but also internal combustion, which would, kick in at certain points. And it was a good way to go to get around, use less fuel. But nowadays, you can drive cross country quite easily in a pure electric, and there's plenty of charging infrastructure. So we were promoting clean technology when little of it existed.
Now, when did your interest in the environment begin? Was there a moment?
The first Earth Day, yeah, 1970. I said, what does Earth Day mean? What are we going to do? I know that's a big celebration of the Earth today, but what do we do the other 364? Well, we're going to clean up the air, we're going to clean up the water, said somebody at this Earth Day event. Well, I went, sign me up. I'd been to the Santa Monica Bay after the oil spill, near Santa Barbara and what have you. I'd seen that there, and the constant pollution in the Santa Monica Bay from things other than oil spills. And then I knew the Cuyahoga River had caught fire near Cleveland. I thought that was a bad sign when rivers catch fire. I didn't think that was good. And every day I lived with that horrible pollution searing my lungs as a young boy in the San Fernando Valley. So I knew air pollution was real. So I set about doing something. And here's the good news, Charles, not because of me, because of many other factors having nothing to do with me, having little to do with me. We have 4 times the cars in LA now, millions more people, but a fraction of the smog. We all did that, driving our Priuses, and the Air Quality Management District did their part. Air Resources Board did theirs. Richard Nixon did his part by signing the Clean Air Act. You wouldn't see that kind of across the aisle cooperation today. And so we clean up the air because of all those things. Good legislation, corporate responsibility, people making cleaner vehicles, and personal action, people like you and me buying cleaner cars. You need all 3. You can't do it with just 2. You want a steady tripod, 3 things holding you up. You can't just be 1 or 2 or it's going to topple. You need good legislation, corporate responsibility, and personal action.
Now, before you, I guess the most famous celebrity environmental person was Eddie Albert. And I was told that Earth Day was his birthday. Do you know anything about that?
I think it might be, but it was definitely into that. Long before he did Green Acres, he was growing corn. His place in Beverly Hills, I think, or Brentwood, someplace like that. He grew vegetables on his property, and a lot of them, not just a little tiny patch. He had a good many of them. He liked that. He was kind of an urban farmer and cared about the environment deeply. His wife, a Latina who celebrated the earth, with him, was very instrumental in all those decisions that they made. And Edward Albert, their son, carried that on, was in a wonderful play that you were kind enough to do with me about Cesar Chavez called Cesar Rubin.
At the age of 59 or 60, I was making my professional musical debut. I had done musicals in elementary school, but you took I had the time of my life doing that show. And then I had to leave, and you took over my part, but the costume, I remember going to see you in it. And you're wearing my old costumes that came up to here on the arms and the legs. That was such a great experience. Cesar and Ruben, could you tell us how you came to do this show?
Well, I had been supporting Cesar Chavez and the United Farm Workers from a distance for a while, sending a check to the United Farm Workers Strike Fund or pledging to not buy any grapes, no uvas. I was down with that. No lechuga, no lettuce. I was down with that. Supported from a distance. And one day near LAX at a restaurant called Pan's, I'm there sitting having my oatmeal, and this man pulls up in a kind of a car in not great shape. I went, wow, that guy looks just like Cesar Chavez. But of course, it can't be him. He wouldn't be driving a car like that. He's an internationally known labor leader. I thought about it just 1 second. I went, of course, that's exactly the kind of car he'd be driving. This guy, Irv, was actually behind the wheel. They pulled up, and walked through the restaurant. When he walked past me, I knew it was most certainly Cesar Chavez. There was no mistaking that. So I went over to his table. I said, "Hello, my name's Ed Begley. I've helped, as best I can with the lettuce strike and the grape strike. So the boycotts, I should say, and the strikes that followed. Anything I can do to help, He said, "Well, we have problems. What's your passion?" He said. I said, "The environment." He says, "Well, I know we all want to save the owls and the whales, but we got to make sure and look out for the people too." And so I said, "I agree. And I know about these kids like Mario Bravo and the Cadillo family that had kids get very sick with these cancer clusters near where all the pesticides were used in generous amounts." So knowing of that, he was very impressed that I knew anything about that. He said, "Well, we're going to work together on pesticide issues. How's that sound?" I said, "Absolutely." We did that for years. Yep. And then 1993, he passed away, and I had the sadness and the honor of carrying his coffin through the streets of Delano. And what a man. I never met Dr. King. I never met, Mahatma Gandhi or Mother Teresa, but he was a man like that did incredible things, did it all nonviolently.
I sometimes think that I'm like that character Zelig that Woody Allen created, who's just always happened. I met Dr. King.
Wow.
I met
I didn't know
Dr.
that.
King. It's so in the green room of the Merv Griffin show.
Wow. What year was this?
Well, 67,
67 or 8.
1967. I had
Yeah.
arranged for Alan. I was working at the Stratford Festival in Canada, and I had arranged for Alan Bates to be a guest on Merv Griffin. And at the last minute, he said, "Charlie, I don't want to go." I said, "What do you mean? I don't want to go." So the festival said, "Well, you've got to go down there in person and apologize for us." So I went down there, and I was watching the show in the green room, and there were all these African American guys sitting in one corner, and I realized it's Martin Luther King and Ralph Abernathy,
My God.
and people who know me think I'm exuberant. I'm basically shy, and what was I going to say to him? But there I was in the same room with him, and a year later he was dead.
God help us.
Yeah, wild. Going back to that Trivial Pursuit period, I also remember so fondly spending so many weekends at your home in Ojai as your guest, and that was a magical place.
It was great. I had been on St. Elsewhere a couple of years, and after 2 years of that, I thought, I've got this wrong. I'm in LA working on this show. We're always trying to get out of town, get my family and me out of town as much as we can. Let's all of us live out of town, and then I'll come in a few days a week, because it wasn't like I was doing Miami Vice, where I was one of 2 guys that's in nearly every scene. I'm an ensemble. I'm in an ensemble show, so I work, maybe a busy week is 3 days in a week. Some weeks it'd be 2 days in a week. And so we moved to Ojai. Malcolm McDowell and Mary Steenburgen were together at that time, and so they had us up for a visit. And the next morning they had a realtor come by to say hello, and we went around with them with the first place that we saw we fell in love with, and we put a bid on it. It took a while to get it, but we finally did. And we moved there, and I had 4 wonderful years there. And then Ingrid, my wonderful first wife, she lived there for a lot of the rest of her days and lived in the area. She went on to Santa Barbara and then to Oxnard after that, and stayed in the area, and a beautiful part of California there.
I remember one Christmas in Ojai, and Harry Dean Stanton was there, and he sang, and I was absolutely blown away.
The Spanish songs that he would sing, yeah.
Yeah, wow. How did you first meet Harry?
I met him where I met most of the people I knew back in the early 70s. I met him at Tanners of the Troubadour. In Harry's case, it was the Troubadour. He had a friend who was on stage. Maybe it was Chris Christopherson or what have you. And Harry was out in the bar. He'd be sitting in the bar, and who would come through the Red Sea parting? Jack Nicholson and Michelle Phillips would be going through the bar to get to the showroom to see Randy Newman. And I met Don Henley there, and Glenn Fry and the rest of the Eagles. And Elton John would play there. It would be one of those, the first club he played in LA before he was doing just stadiums. Bette Midler played there. You could go there for a $2 cover and a 2-drink minimum, and you could see Joni Mitchell, 12 feet away. There was no bad seat in the house. The furthest you'd be would be like 28, 30 feet away would be the seating in the back would be 30 feet away from the stage. You see, James Taylor, you'd see Richard Pryor, Albert Brooks, you'd see great comedians. It was a magical place for decades.
And that's when you were doing stand-up with Michael Richards?
Yeah, we started there at the Troubadour, and then Michael went in the Army, so I went off on my own and did a solo act, and then he came back to LA eventually and started doing comedy again, then got Fridays with Larry David, and then Seinfeld, and became part of television history.
Tell us the story about the sketch where you were the policeman and you entered from the street.
Oh yeah, I had done my act out in Reseda for a friend, and I was going into the Troubadour. I told the cops a lie. I said I was about to go on stage. That's why I was there, but I left my uniform on like a moron, and I went into the bar, and they saw me go in. The sheriff's department guys saw me go in. They thought I was a real LAPD officer who was in pursuit or something. Why is he in our sheriff's department area, the county of Los Angeles area? And so I said, no, I'm just an actor. And I was out front of the Troubadour at this point out in the street. So you're impersonating an officer. I said, no, I'm not. Are Kent McCord and Martin Milner impersonating officers? They're just actors doing a part. I'm doing a part, but it's on stage. Go ask the guys. And they vouched for me. I think they continued the lie that I was to be on stage later that night. I was not. Maybe they figured out I was lying, but they took me to county jail where I probably belonged, being stupid enough to leave a LAPD uniform on. It was quick release because I had an act that I would change costume quickly. It was Velcro. I could have just taken off the shirt, the LAPD shirt with a badge on it, and I'd look like a production assistant or something. I just have black pants and a white T-shirt. But I left down that LAPD uniform shirt with a badge on it. So they put me where I probably belonged, which was county jail for a few days.
Days?
Oh, yeah, I was there for 3 days. You don't do anything wrong on the weekends. Back then, there was no ATMs. They didn't have the kind of credit card. I didn't have a credit card, certainly. I didn't know anybody that had $500. Impersonating an officer is a serious crime, so the bail was $500. And even if I could raise it, if I knew some rich drug dealer or friend who had $500 to pay $50, which would be the fee for the bail bondsman down the line. I was not happy, but I was resigned to waiting until Monday to see a judge and get out on my own recognizance, which I did.
Were you ever mistaken for a doctor all those years on St. Elsewhere? Did people come up to you? And
I'm told when people did shows like Marcus Welby or those kind of shows of Ben Casey or Dr. Kildare, people would come up asking for medical advice. By the time I did St. Elsewhere in 1982, the public was way beyond that. They would go, I hear your Nielsen ratings are high, but the Q factor is even higher. So you're getting good ad revenue they knew, the ins and outs from watching Entertainment Tonight or something, but they knew the details about everything. They didn't think we were doctors at all. They knew we were actors, and they had a level of detail about our ratings, which was disquieting because we were never a hit show with ratings. They got good ad revenue because of the Q rating, I believe, but we didn't get, we were, the first season that we came out here were the 3 lowest shows. Family Ties was 68th, 69th was a new show called Cheers, and St. Elsewhere was 70th, the absolute bottom of the ratings ladder. And they wisely picked up all 3 shows.
Wow. A different world.
Yeah, Brandon Tartikoff was the one. And more important than Brandon liking the show, his wife Lily Tartikoff loved the show. So he picked it up because of that. People did things like that back in the 80s. And it, proved to be very...
And you crossed over. The cast went into the bar in Cheers, as I recall.
They did. There was some cross-pollination there with Cheers, and what a great show that was. Ted's a good friend. I still see him, and, wonderful, wonderful show.
Wow. I saw a medical magazine recently that had you on the cover talking about Parkinson's. You want to talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, I'm asked about it often. I had it since 2004. I didn't know I had it for years. I knew something was happening. When I guess I'm getting old a little quicker than I thought, but I still, to my credit, I rode my bike up the hill up to Mulholland every day from Laurel and Ventura, rode around Franklin Canyon Lake and back home. That was just for starters. I go to the gym every day, and that kept it at bay. That and eating properly kept it from being really apparent at all. Finally, I was having trouble with my speech, being articulate, enunciating my words, and so I went to a speech therapist. After just one visit, she called up my doctor and said, "Why is it not on Ed Begley's chart about his Parkinson's?" My doctor said, "We hadn't diagnosed him with Parkinson's. What?" She said, "I have, like 20 Parkinson's patients that come here for speech therapy. He definitely has Parkinson's, in my opinion." And we tested with two neurologists, the top guy at UCLA and the top guy at Cedars, and they both concurred that I did in fact have Parkinson's, but it was still quite subtle back then. But here's the way Parkinson's is nowadays if you take the right meds. I don't know if you can see there. That's the way things are, which is pretty damn steady. I could pass a sobriety checkpoint if I had to without pulling out my neurologist's phone number and said, "Call him, he'll tell you I have Parkinson's." It's very rare that I shake at all, and I still go to the gym every day. I eat properly and do other stuff that Rochelle came up with by consulting different friends and other, other access online. I do hyperbaric chamber, which helps a lot. I do something called NAD, which helps a lot. Do something called glutathione. And again, exercise is one of the best things you can do. Vigorous exercise every day.
You don't take any meds?
I do. I take something called carbidopa levodopa. It's a pill called Rytary, but I take very little of it after being diagnosed in 2016. I didn't take any of that back then. I just took something called Azilect, which is a very mild drug to treat Parkinson's, and that worked for a while. And then it again proceeded so slowly that I could take very small amounts, which I still do. God, it's 8 years later now, a little over 8 years since I was diagnosed, and I take very little of it, and very little is enough to keep me steady.
Again, you're an inspiration. I mean, you've dealt with it, and you continue to work as an actor and an activist. It's fabulous. Congratulations.
I'm very lucky. Two separate people and some production people on several shows I've done. I said, "I want to thank you guys for these past 2 seasons working with you. You're so accommodating with my Parkinson's." "You what? What did you just say?" "So my Parkinson's. I know you're taking it easy on an old man because of my age too." But he said, "We didn't know you have Parkinson's. We didn't know you had Parkinson's." So I was kind of impressed that I would be working this close, like 18 inches away from several people, production behind the camera and in front of the camera, dear friends, and they didn't even know I had it. That was good news to me.
Are you still on the board of the Academy?
No, after 15 years, there's term limits, and they rightly created a rule that people should move on after a decade and a half. Otherwise, you don't get to hear, new opinions and perhaps in some cases younger opinions and more diversity. I think the changes that they made at the Academy are very good, and I supported them when those rules came into being.
We both suffered a great loss this year. I can't even talk. Dabney. And he was very special to me and to you. And if it wasn't for you, I would not have known him. I had a friend, George Bloomfield, a director from Canada, who had directed a film in Toronto that Dabney was in. And when George came down, he stayed with me. And I would get messages on my answering machine from Gary Cooper, which I thought, who the hell? Wait a minute. Gary Cooper, he's dead. But that was my introduction to Dabney.
He did a perfect Gary Cooper. I mean, absolutely perfect.
Well, I remember of an evening at Dantana's, he would do his Gary Cooper. When he found out I did Clark Gable, he got crazy about that. So he and I would do Cooper and Gable. And then, of course, Nicholson was your guy. And have you had any contact with him in recent years?
Oh yeah, I see him somewhat regularly. I see him a few times a year, and he's in great shape and very funny, and he's an amazing force of nature. He's been part of my life in Hollywood since I met him in 1972. So how lucky am I to have met somebody like that and still see him on his birthday and perhaps another event or two.
Well, in memory of Dabney, I'm just wondering if I can ask you to channel Jack Nicholson about the election this year.
I'm going to decline only because my hearing has gotten so bad and my throat with the Parkinson's. That's one thing that I have lost because of this thing. I can't. It's a very bad impression now because of my hearing loss and difference in my throat. Or I would do it right now.
It's one of my great memories. So, looking back over, how did you get your SAG card? Weren't you a teenager or an adolescent?
I was 17 and I did a show called My Three Sons in July of 1967. I was not yet 18. I'd been going on auditions for years since I was about 10 or 11. Got nothing, of course, nor should I have gotten any part. I had no idea what I'm doing. I thought, my dad's, an actor. That looks easy. Let me get a job doing that. I kind of resented him. Thank God I never said it to him out loud. I would have gotten the back of the hand, I'm sure. Dad, why don't you get me a series? I want to be on Wagon Train. Get me a Gunsmoke. In fact, I want to be a regular on that show too. Perry Mason, make a call, Dad. Come on, make it happen. Having no idea that, of course, he did not have that power to pick up the phone and get me a job, nor should he. And if he did, I wouldn't have appreciated it. And finally, when I started to take some classes, get some training as an actor, then I began to work.
So you never got a chance to work with him?
Sadly, no. I wish I had. I did a version of acting with him. For years, I cued him with his lines. I would run lines with him, and so that would, help me. He'd give a little tip. He said, Eddie, it'd help me if you do this line a little bit like that. That'd be, if you would ever get a part like that, I think that would be an interesting way to do it. So say this line with that and take a beat there and say this without, saying it out loud. He was giving me a little acting lesson there, with where I was helping him run lines. He was helping me in a major way, an actor of that stature. And I didn't appreciate for years what a good actor he was. I hadn't seen 12 Angry Men. I hadn't seen Sweet Bird of Youth. I hadn't seen Patterns. I hadn't seen these shows. Boomerang. He was great in all of them. So somebody'd ask me in his presence, who's your favorite actor? I'd go, oh, Clark Gable. I love Clark Gable. The answer should have been Ed Begley. He's right here in front of me. My dad is fantastic. And it wouldn't have been a far-fetched opinion other people held. You don't appreciate your folks sometimes until years after.
Didn't you go on the fan tour with him in the summer?
Say that again?
Where he would go. Wasn't it the people who would come to see him in a show and say, well, if you're ever in such and such, come and see us?
Oh, yeah, he would definitely do that. We'd stop in Grass Lakes, Michigan, and see a guy called Lou Ramp and his wife, whose name I can't remember, but we'd be driving cross country, which is the way we got cross country most of the time, either the train or driving. We didn't start flying till the early to mid 60s. Most movie stars flew in a plane across country, not working actors. You would drive or take the train. But driving cross country, we'd stop there in Michigan regularly to see Lou Ramp. And he had other friends like that whose names I can't remember. We'd spend the night there and save money on a hotel room. My dad was very thrifty.
If you could see your dad today, what would you say to him?
I'd be filled with gratitude. I'd make it known to him how much I appreciate so many things he did for me.
Yeah, I feel the same way. They never leave us. Yeah. Ed, it's been a joy as always, and an honor to have you as my first guest on Paid to Dream.
Thanks a lot, Charles. Have a good one.
You too, man.